Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It is Friday, April 26th. Derek Van Riper, Eno Saris here with you. We got a special guest joining us at the beginning of today's show. It is Mets reliever Adam Ottavino. Adam, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here, guys.
So we want to start today by taking a trip back in time. I want to go back to your time in Colorado because one of the recurring themes on our podcast is we think Colorado is the most difficult place to win in Major League Baseball, regardless of ownership or anything like that, just because of the conditions of the park. You had a lot of success as a Rocky. You're third all time in ERA among Rockies relievers in franchise history, second in strikeout rate. Simple question. How did you do it? Like, what do you think about your arsenal worked well in a place that so many pitchers have struggled in?
Yeah, it's a good question. When I first got claimed off waivers by the Rockies, I think a lot of people would have, in my shoes, would have been like maybe upset about that, knowing the situation there. But I was really excited because I was in St. Louis before that, and I just wasn't getting a lot of opportunity. And I figured, hey, if I go to Colorado, people are going to be pitching poorly, so I should get a chance here. And I just kind of embraced it from day one, I think. So that's the first part, just the mental part of it. Like, I understood the challenge, and I kind of understood the difference between the sea level movement and the mile high movement pretty quickly. And I just tried to adjust as fast as I could. I do think that my arsenal worked there for a couple of reasons. I think, the sweeper, to me, kind of protected me against those hangers a little bit. I would throw a lot of them, and I wouldn't worry about how high they were or low in the zone. And a lot of guys would swing under them. The ball just kind of would never come down. It would kind of just sweep across the zone at the top. And I think it was just a different look than other guys were seeing. And I actually remember being on first base one time, and Carlos Lee was the first baseman. And he said, Papa, you're nasty. And I was like, well, I feel like I threw you some pretty good pitches to hit there. And he said, yeah, but like, I thought they were going to break down, and they never broke down. Like, I swing under them, and I don't know which way to track your slider. So that was kind of the first hint I got, where it was like, okay, like if I can keep it flat and just moving left, I think it'll play here. And I think the second part of it is just my ability to get called strikes. Any ball in play is a dangerous ball at course. So if you can limit balls in play, I think that gives you a little bit of a better chance.
One thing that's interesting about the sweeper is that it's a seam shifted wake pitch, right? So it's trying to gather seams and catch those seams and stay up. That's like what you're talking about there, that phenomenon. There's no air.
I know.
Did it stay up less in Colorado, but still more than people expected? Did you have sort of a gyro component to it? Was it like, is it not the truest sweeper? Like, why did that work when so for example, other seam shifted weight, like changeups don't work that well there, right?
Yeah. Well, yes, obviously a pure gyro pitch is going to be the least affected pitch there. And at the time I was throwing multiple sliders. I was throwing more of a gyro with depth pitch. And then the sweeper was kind of like a surprise pitch. So I do think there was an element of it where they were expecting two plane action, like more of a depthy break to it. And then it just didn't break as much as they expected. So I think that's
your sweeper is better at sea level though.
Yeah. I mean, well, it's bigger and it does stay up a little more.
Okay.
But you know what? Also from a command perspective, that kind of maybe helped me a little bit in Colorado too, is it wasn't as big. I could keep it in the zone. I was a guy who struggled with my walk rate for a lot of my career, and especially when I was younger. And I felt like, I was in the zone a little more in course. I was getting to the better counts. I was getting to 0-2, 1-2 a lot. And I've always had, an ability to kind of put guys away when I got to that spot. So just getting to those counts, I think is just huge no matter where you are. And I think maybe it was a little easier for me at course to throw strikes.
You had, you didn't have the worst. So the cutter seems to have debuted in 2015 while you're in Colorado.
Yeah, the first cutter I had, it was 2015. Yeah,
that didn't come after a bad walk year. So, take me through the thought process the first time you did the cutter. I think you had a couple iterations on that.
Yeah, that was just like I wanted to work my way into the ninth inning, and I didn't want to be just a righty specialist. So I was just struggling with that platoon split, and I needed to come up with a third pitch to kind of bridge the gap between the other two. Even though I was throwing multiple sliders, they were all in the same speed range. So I felt like I needed something that was kind of more neutral movement and, more neutral speed. Like it wasn't 95 and it wasn't 80, something in the middle. So that was the idea behind the cutter. It's still the idea behind the cutter, but I've definitely gone through like 5 different, cutter grips and thought processes over time.
Yeah.
But yeah,
most famously was the time that you set up shop and kind of built your own pitching lab in New York. What year was that? And what sort of thinking, what was the thought process that time when you did the cutter?
It was between 2017 and 2018 was the first time.
So that's the year where you had your worst walk rate. You're coming off.
Yeah, I had a horrible year in 17. I just felt like I had been in the division a while, and I had gotten hurt in 2015. So that cutter that I had kind of got semi-shelved through my Tommy John. When I came out the other side, I didn't have a great feel for it. I was still throwing it a little bit in 17, but that was the year that the league just decided to stop swinging against me.
Yeah.
And so I just was walking everybody. My delivery was all out of whack. That's the first thing I needed to fix that offseason. But then I really wanted to dial in on like some sort of cue for that cutter. And that was where the Edgertronic came into play. And I started figuring things out from that side. And just gave me something to think about. So I wasn't out there kind of hoping. I kind of was out there with a little more conviction behind that pitch. And I used it a lot in 2018, actually mostly to righties, which is funny. But, ended up being a huge pitch for me because I used it a lot first pitch, kind of avoid the ambush. I figured if they were going to ambush me, they were looking fastball or slider. So I would use it a lot first pitch, and then I could get to an 0-1 count without them seeing, my best options.
Is that the same cutter you're throwing now?
It's a little different. I continue to change my grip. I mean, following the sticky crackdown, I had to move to something a little bit more on the seams because my hand wasn't glued to the ball anymore. So I was having a hard time making it do what I wanted without slipping out. So I'm on the seam a little more now, and now I think of it as 2 different pitches, actually. I think of it more as like a flat cutter when I'm trying to throw it in the zone, and more of like a gyro depthy slider when I want it to be chase.
Is that a sort of a side of the ball hand mechanic cue there for, you're more on the side when you want it to go down and you're more behind it?
Yeah, so my fingers are more spread when I want to keep it flat, and I try to think of it like just an off-center fastball. I turn my wrist maybe like 40, 45 degrees and just kind of pull straight through it. And when I throw the downer version of it, I get my fingers together and I try to get like over the ball.
Well, that's like a breaking ball.
It's basically a breaking ball, but we just call it a cutter, and they kind of know what to expect. And the reason why I keep it as a cutter, because I want to think about throwing it as hard as I can.
Right.
And as soon as I think breaking ball, I tend to supinate extra, wrap the ball, and a lot of speed.
And that's how you throw your sweeper.
Yeah, I mean, if you, I'm all the way on the right side of the ball, and my hand is, hanging on for dear life on the side of that ball as I come through, and I'm spinning it. I'm like just right off the end of it, so I do get very supinated, and I wrap the ball quite a bit. Yeah.
So you kind of did that on your own a little bit. The cutter and the storefront in New York, and Travis Sawchik had a great story, and we've talked about that a lot. So what happened? So that was. I'm not trying to talk crap on Colorado, but like you kind of were like, okay, pitch design is the thing. I'm not really maybe getting it from my team, so I'm gonna just go and do this on my own. Is that part of it? And then when you started changing teams after that, did anybody screw around with your sweeper, or was that always just like, now you got that, let's see what the other stuff, or was there any surprises when you got to a new team and they're like, we think you can get even more sweep, or whatever?
Well, the first part of the question, when I was with the Rockies, they definitely didn't understand it at first. I've always, dug around on YouTube and the internet trying to, see what other people are doing. And at the time, Trevor Bauer and a couple other guys were really the only people putting out pitch design stuff on the internet. And obviously it was very interesting to me. My dad had always commented it'd be great if we could see the ball release off your fingertips so we could get some real info. And, the technology had just caught up at that point. So I called that Edgertronic company and I basically said, hey, have baseball people been calling you guys? And they said, yeah, a few have. So I was like, all right.
I'm on the right track here.
Yeah, I was on the right track. When I went to Driveline, a lot of it was me learning how to use the camera so I could do it at home. My dad was helping me. He was the one clicking the shutter and everything. So,
and that's just super important because you're connecting what you have in your head with what like feel versus real versus sort of thing. Like you sort of see what's actually happening.
Yeah, exactly. And actually a pitch that helped me a lot was my two seam. I used to be like a traditional grip right on the train tracks like everybody else. And then I kind of saw on the camera that my middle finger was kind of overwhelming. It was kind of overwhelming the pitch a little bit, and it wasn't getting to that seam shift point. Now, at the time, we didn't know it was seam shift, but I knew which way I needed the ball to spin because I had just seen some information on that. Like, we didn't still know what was going on, but we knew, okay, if you can get the face of the ball to be open on, like, the left side.
That's the Barton Smith stuff, the early Barton Smith stuff, where he's
right.
talking about the looper and
start drawing the Sharpie on the ball.
Yeah,
anyway,
nice.
I was able to make an adjustment with my middle finger and actually take it off the seam a little bit. And my two seam took off that next year. It became like a really, really good pitch for me. So that was the beginnings of it. But the interesting thing with the Rockies was, I get to spring training 2018 and I bring my camera with me and I had the video guy set it up behind me in my bullpens and even my live BPs. And pitching coach at the time got very upset with me and called me into, the conference room one day. And he's like, you're trying to get me fired.
I'm just trying to do my best.
I said, no. Like, I'm not trying to go above you. I said, listen, I would love for you to watch the videos with me. Like, I'd love your two brains are better than one on this. I would love for you to watch the stuff with me. And I said, but, not for nothing. I'm not trying to be, an ass or anything, but like, you might want to brush up on this stuff. Because
right. This is what's coming.
Yeah. And so obviously I had a great year that year. And, next year I signed with the Yankees and already it's more prevalent there. As soon as I got there, a lot seemed to happen in that 2018 year. Things really took off around the league. And by the time I got to the
Yankees had Edgertronics on every bullpen mound in that spring training as soon as you got there.
Right. So they had everything. And, they were more interested in talking strategy with me. They didn't really want to mess with my pitch mix too much. I mean, they liked it. That's why they signed me. They just wanted to talk a little bit more strategy and how they saw the game, in terms of how often to throw my slider and stuff like that. And really ever since then, I've been in places where the coaches and the organization has given me a lot of freedom to explore my own arsenal and adding to it. Now I have change up and, I brought back the four seam into the loop a little bit. They're willing to help me, but they know that I kind of know what I'm doing out there for the most part. And they're just willing to kind of help me with that process rather than kind of force me into anything.
I like this question we got from one of our viewers. Philip wants to know, do you think of yourself as having two separate arsenals, what you do against righties versus what you do against lefties?
Well, I have all pitches and I will throw all of them to everyone. But as you can see in the early going here, like, my preference is to be mostly sinker, sweeper versus righties. And lefties, I got to throw the kitchen sink out there. So lefties, it's any pitch. It's all five pitches all the time. Obviously, certain pitches play well off each other. But, yeah, with the righties, for the most part, it's sinker, slider. And if I feel like they're really good, I have changeup in the bag there.
One thing that Alex Cobb told me about the about seam shifted wake, that at least as he felt it, was that it was finicky. And that's something I've heard from Clay Holmes as well, that it can come and go. Yours seems really solid. Like, I don't think I've seen a bad one necessarily. I know you probably have. You've seen all your pitches, but this idea, like Clay Holmes was like, I had to develop some cues for if I was losing that seam shift wake, they weren't really taking off. Some minor cues I could kind of shuffle through to maybe find it again. But I also think about, how does that dovetail with command? I know you have big shapes, and big shapes are harder to command. So you have two things that are working against your command. You're throwing big shapes, and they depend on seam shifted wake to some extent. I know the cutter is part of that, but what's the other part of that? What's the part about how have you really honed in on commanding your sinker and your sweeper when they're that big and they depend on seam shifted wake?
So every day in catch play, I mean, I long toss with 4-seam fastball. And then when I get back to about 90 feet, I throw 3 changeups from 90 feet. And at that point, I switch to the ball with the dot on it so I can make sure I get real-time feedback on the spin of my changeup and my sinker every day. And then when I get to 60, I throw my pitches from 60, and I try to just make sure I'm seeing the spin the way I want it. But it is true. It is a little finicky. I do think it's important to pay attention when you get up closer to full intensity of what your pitches are doing. You might not be able to tell as much in catch play or even warming up. But when you get out there for even those 5-6 before the inning and you let them fly, sometimes you can get a feel like, oh, that's moving a lot today, or that's not going to move as much. At Citi Field in particular, and a lot of day games, we get a little bit of a wind in our face. And the pitch metrics go crazy. They go crazy those days. Like, you can throw 25-inch sinkers and 25-inch sweepers, and guys that don't even have 18-inch vert on their 4 seams will get 20s.
Wow.
So it's important to kind of know that, when on the days. So when I'm on the iPad,
is that because the wind is coming in towards you up top and then comes back and then
kind of like swirls? We think it kind of swirls and then just gently comes out towards you a little bit. So there's a little bit of wind resistance there. So obviously it gives you a little bit more
extra resistance to kind of grab the seams and do stuff with.
Yeah, and so like when I'm on those dugout iPads, I'm always checking the metrics on every pitcher. And
you have a sense from the other guys what they're doing, what's happening today.
So I know what my guys' pitches are supposed to look like shape-wise. So I can see, okay, this is one of those days. And then when I go out there, I know that I have to start my slider, my sweeper, even more to the right. Like, if I'm throwing to a righty, I got to really throw it at him to keep it on the plate. And it's just like a constant calibration process. Now, luckily, I've gotten better at it because I've got enough experience to kind of understand what I'm feeling and what I'm seeing. But it is tricky. With the sinker in particular, like at Coors, it would be tough because I felt like I couldn't start it off the plate. I felt like I had to throw it on the plate, like right at the corner to get that backdoor 2-seam. Whereas you go on the road and you feel like you can throw it, a fair amount off the plate and let it run back.
Because just all movement is less in Colorado.
Yeah, and then like just depending on the situation, the mindset is kind of like, okay, I want to miss over the plate here, or I want to miss not over the plate here. So that's kind of where the command part comes in a little bit. Like, obviously, if I need to still throw more strikes in the at-bat to get in the right count, most of the time I'm okay missing over the plate. It might not be a perfect pitch, but it's better than throwing an easy take for a ball, And then, but if I have count leverage, and I'm not sure if he's going to protect that outside corner, like, I'll try to throw it perfect or miss it off the plate a little bit. So it's more of that mindset.
Another one of our viewers has a question, same as mine question. Steven Jazul wants to know, are you aware of the wind and weather quirks at all stadiums? Certainly being in your home park, it's easier to pick up on those patterns, but is that something you try to study and figure out series to series now?
No. We would maybe notice it in a game because, again, like, I'm looking at the metrics of my guys, so I have an idea of, if let's say, like when Verlander was with us, like, I had an idea of like what his fastball does, what his slider does, and if it looked out of the norm, I might feel like, oh, okay, maybe there's something different going on with the weather here today.
But no other parks come to mind as being kind of weird?
Washington, I've had a couple games for sure where the wind it felt like it was blowing right to left, so like third base to first base. And that felt like it made my sweeper take off crazy, but it would resist the comeback of my sinker. So that's a little bit of a different slight variation there, but I don't know. You try to be aware of it all, but at the same time, there's just so much feel involved in the moment.
Well, here's where we can maybe take a little bit of a segue to like another way of looking at organizations is just that, for example, Tampa is in a dome. is an inside one. And what I found with Stuff Plus is that Stuff Plus loves domes. Stuff Plus loves being inside. It just loves it. It's like it's just easier. Just not, you don't have these you don't have chaos as much.
There's less variables.
More controlled environment for sure.
And so Tampa is always like number 1 or number 2 in Stuff Plus, which is like says to me, well, they have their own Stuff Plus, and mine must be somewhat similar. So we're aligning on that. They have the situation to do it, but then they also coach to it. They take people and they say things like, hey, you should throw your best pitch more often, or hey, you should, try to get this more vert on this or more drop on this. Do you see more and more of that in New York? Because I'm getting the sense that New York is building up in this way. That at least in the minor leagues, they've been really working on that. Do you like when the younger relievers and stuff? Do they now speak more of that language? And is there like is New York developing an ethos, like that? Where
yeah. I mean, every guy that comes up now speaks the language for sure. Right. There are less 2-pitch guys though now too. There's most guys have 3 real pitches and working on a 4th or 5th.
Even in the pen.
Even in the pen, yeah. It seems to be kind of just where things are headed, because a lot of times now we're matching in pitch design. Organizations are matching new pitches to arm slots. They're saying, okay, this is your arm slot. You're a good candidate for this pitch. If you're really over the top, that death ball that everybody's chasing seems to be something that people go for.
Fairbanks, yeah.
You got the lower arm slot. You kind of end up in a sinker, cutter, seam shifted, change up, sweeper, and like kind of a not great metric 4-seam, but just from a low slot, so it works okay with VAA. People just kind of end up there, to be honest. But yes, in terms of pitch selection, every organization I've been in the last 5 years is preaching pitch to your strengths, throw your best pitch as much as you can and build off of that. And that's been the case for me in my career. Like, I don't go out there telling myself, I have to throw X amount of this or that. But I do know that if I let my sweeper be the primary pitch, everything else seems to play better after that.
Yeah. So pitching backwards in a way.
Yeah, because a lot of it is like, you just try to figure out like, well, in a vacuum, if I threw my pitches right down the middle, which one would I be the most comfortable with the results with? And for me, it's the sweeper, because ultimately they're gonna, like, the slugging is not going to be that high on it, and the expected batting average isn't going to be crazy. So I can live with throwing that pitch right down the middle with them knowing it more than the other pitches. So that's where that kind of comes from. You start with that, and then you figure out how to pitch off that.
So are we approaching a homogeny across baseball? There's still little things that people do differently, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, first of all, the arm slots are all over the place. The angles that guys are creating are still very, very different. But I do think that because we have such a good idea of how to teach all the pitches now, I do think that we are headed a little bit more towards a homogeny a little bit, in that regard, just because, we just have way more information of how to throw it. I mean, the sweeper, the amount of people that learned it in the last 3 or 4 years is just wild to me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I wonder if changeups are kind of the Wild Wild West now. At least, I mean, we know about seam shifted wake, but it seems like when I do Stuff Plus and stuff, like I changeups are still the hardest to nail down.
Yeah.
What was your process like in bringing the changeup back this year?
Yeah, I tried to work on a good changeup for a while. I was using Rapsodo years ago, and it didn't really give me the full picture, so I wasn't seeing the seam shift wake properties of the movement, and it was kind of spooking me and telling me that my changeup was really, really bad. And I know that even right now, the Mets don't love the movement on my changeup, but I feel like I know when to throw it. And I also feel like
tell me a little bit about that technological difference, because is TrackMan has a better
so
they have that difference between observed, like Savant has the difference between observed spin and actual spin or something, or
I do think that Rapsodo has caught up now, but at the time they were just doing spin-based movement, so they were basically capturing the way the ball moved came out of your hand, and then basically assuming the movement of it, whereas TrackMan's tracking the movement and then reverse engineering it.
Yeah.
And that's where the differences started to become apparent, where it's like, you're releasing it this way, it should not have moved that much, but it did. There's the seam shift. That's the difference. That's what happened there along the ball flight.
So you were looking for that when you were building your changeup. You're looking for a difference between spin-based movement and actual movement.
Yeah, I mean, we just knew that we were studying Steven Strasburg at the time, and he was getting his changeup to 3:00, right, on the clock, and I was trying to get mine to 3:00. But
are your release points similar?
More similar than you would think.
Wow.
But mine, it just kept saying that my spin was 2:00, 2:15. But that's kind of how I was. That's how I was releasing it. On the seam shift, it was getting to 3:00. I just didn't know that until I got the TrackMan regularly, and then I said, "Oh, I'm actually onto something." And the first year I had the changeup, I actually had really good movement on it. I was averaging about 0 vert and like 16, 17 horizontal. It was like really nice, but I couldn't control it at all. It was another situation where my grip wasn't serving me well. Like my thumb wasn't on a seam. The ball was coming out of my hand like earlier than I wanted it to. So coming into last year, I shifted that a little bit, got more on the seam, and actually started being able to command the pitch. The movement then kind of wasn't as good. It was about 1 vert and like 13 horizontal. So it wasn't anything special, but being that I kind of had a good sense of when to throw it, and now I could actually command it, it played really well. And it was my most effective pitch last year in terms of like, just run value.
Cool.
Well, Adam, we know we got a game coming up for you tonight.
Yeah.
So you got to get on the way to the ballpark. We appreciate the time and the insight, and hopefully we'll catch up with you again sometime down the road.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, of course.
It's Mets reliever Adam Ottavino, one of the originators of the sweeper, right? He's on board before the sweeper was cool. I think that's the tagline for Adam Ottavino. But that success in Colorado, that just jumped off the page when we were preparing for the interview. Breaking news happening in the background that we're going to get to here in just a few minutes. You love it when the Live Hive lights up with questions and then there's breaking news interspersed with it. The news here is that Jackson Holliday has been optioned back to AAA.
Oh, they made the decision to reset. All right.
I don't know. How do you feel about that? Knowing that it was a very brief opportunity, but it did not go well. 50% K rate is a really rough start, but I don't love it. I think there are other toggles. This could have continued for another week or two, and maybe then it's right. But it just feels a tick early. If you believed he was ready, I feel like you have to stand by that a little bit longer. I know they don't have the luxury of letting things play out because every game matters when you're a team that wants to go to the postseason. But this feels pretty quick to send him back.
Yeah. I know we've just had some think pieces about what it's like to be struggling and how everyone's telling him you'll be fine. And yeah, I think one of the hardest things to know as a player is when to change the process. Because people, especially if you have like a strong network like he does, and your dad who's played forever is telling you you're fine, then you don't change the process. But if is there something wrong with the process? I would have to say that a 16% swing strike rate is not good. And what does that come in terms of pitches? 148. I mean, that's obviously not a great sample, but it's also really not good contact rate. So I don't know. If he is going to change something, it's going to be super high profile, and he's going to have to do that away from the public eye as much, I think. So yeah, that'll be the big discussion. The big question is it time to change stuff, or is it just time to reset the attitude? Like, not I'm not saying he has bad attitude, but like the confidence.
Yeah. That's the hardest thing to know when we're on the outside looking in. We don't know how he's internalizing that.
Yeah.
The question from Pat in the Live Hive is Kobe Mayo's timeline moved up. Maybe. I sounds like Ryan McKenna was the corresponding move when they sent Holliday down. That could be more weird about the upcoming schedule and matchups and certain things like that, as opposed to
what's the weak link though? I mean, Gunnar is playing short and he's great. Adley's not moving. Santander, even with his struggles, is 16% better than league average. I think that Hayes has really fallen off, and just Kazer's taking his job. Mountcastle is raking. I have seven guys that are more than 10% above league average with the bat. And that includes Cedric Mullins. So, and that doesn't include Ryan O'Hearn. So if you get to Ryan O'Hearn, that's 8. The backup catcher is almost at league average. So I guess Ramon Urias is the weak link, but he's not counted in this. What's the position I'm missing? You've got 3 outfielders, right? Causer, Mullins, and Santander. You got a shortstop. Westberg is okay. So there's an opening there. It's second or third.
Yeah, it's just the spot that Holliday vacated, and you could move Westberg to that spot and play someone else at third. It comes down to who you like better defensively where, and you're probably going to play Ramon Urias a little bit more in the short term. I think the only thing with Kobe Mayo that stands out to me just number scouting what's happening at AAA now versus last year. He's striking out more. He's striking out 29.9% of the time. He's not walking as much as he was. Still has a very bright future. Still a big part of the plan.
Destroying the ball.
Like, don't you want to see that K rate come down a little bit before you bring him up, though, so you avoid or reduce the likelihood of the same problem you just ran into with Jackson Holliday?
It's also a little bit weird because he's right-handed, and so it's not a good combo with Urias. But who do they have that's left-handed? Gunner's left-handed, right? I think so.
Gunner?
Yeah, Gunner bats left-handed. Cedric Mullins bats left-handed. Santander is a switch. Rutschman is switch.
Causer's a lefty. O'Hearn's a lefty.
So they could actually maybe use a righty, huh?
Kerstad's a lefty.
Yeah. Is Kerstad playing?
Just got called up. I think
he played
he
once.
Has to play, right?
He didn't. He also didn't play against a lefty.
Yeah, but he's gonna play against righties as long as he's on the roster.
Why is he up? Because they've got O'Hearn and Mountcastle.
Because Mountcastle's a righty, O'Hearn's a lefty, so you can get 2 lefties in if you want to sit Mountcastle on a particular day between first base and DH, or you could jam him in the outfield if you want to give one of the outfielders a day off.
They have so much talent. It's just ridiculous. I suppose Mayo. I mean, I think the big thing is that, like, if Causer, with Causer and Mateo, they do have backup center fielders. So I guess the big thing is when Hayes is healthy, they may not want to bring up Mayo because and is Mayo on the 40-man roster yet?
Fair question. I don't think he's on the 40-man unless they had to just add him this past winter. Do not know off the top of my head. Wish I did.
Hold on, Mayo, not on the 40-man roster.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
So you'd have to drop somebody. I mean, if like Bradish ends up, getting hurt and going to the IL 60, that opens up a roster spot. But like, if they need to open up a roster spot, then they need to drop somebody. And that means like losing talent. Like, are they going to drop Jonathan Heasley? I guess that's possible. You could just drop Jonathan Heasley and make room for yourself there. But, that's on the pitching side. So maybe there's a balance you're trying to have. You're going to drop Kyle Stowers. You're going to DFA Kyle Stowers in order to get Mayo on the roster. I think that's probably the holdup. It's the 40-man roster. And also the fact that Hayes at some point is going to come back. So right now, I think they're also so stacked offensively that they're like, hey, Urias plus Mateo, that's fine. We'll get by with that.
This is important from Jay Rogers. They didn't have any other outfielders on the 40-man when Austin Hayes got hurt either. So maybe Ryan McKenna, who just came up, ends up being the guy that eventually goes next, right? It's a revolving door. When you have this much talent, it's a constant squeeze to get everything to fit. Producer Brian also sent me a note. Tommy Pham coming up for the White Sox. Kevin Pillar DFA'd. So if you've been waiting on Tommy Pham, and I have been in a surprising number of leagues, the door is now open for Pham to try and elevate that White Sox offense a little bit.
Well, you've got Dominic Fletcher with a 62 WRC plus. He supposedly makes a ton of contact, but has a 30% strikeout rate. He's got to get past Robbie Grossman, who has a 68 WRC plus. And I think he can do that.
Team is so depressing right now. Just
Andrew
unbelievably
Benintendi
depressing.
has a 10 WRC plus.
Cool.
But he's also under contract for a few more years. So I kind of feel like the normal will be Benintendi. Oh, and Robert's hurt, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Robert's hurt. So
major hip injury.
So it's Benintendi, Grossman, Pham. Oh, my God. Well, don't expect many runs in RBI from Pham.
Yeah, he'll play a lot, so that'll make him relevant still in deeper leagues. Still has power, still has speed. I don't know. I'm a little more optimistic than you are. Since we're on the White Sox, one of the topics we had for today is talking about some deeper pitching surprises that we have not discussed yet. How about Erick Fedde? He's pitching well in his return from the KBO, right? A small glimmer of hope for the White Sox, just in terms of maybe having someone that they could trade to a league desperate for pitching. We just saw 11 strikeouts, a season high from Fedde last time out against the Twins earlier this week. He's up to a 30-9 strikeout to walk ratio through 5 starts, 26 in the third innings. The ratios look good. The win probability is low every single time he goes out there because, as we've said many times on this show, team's just not good. But are you trusting what Erick Fedde has done up to this point through his first 5 starts back in the big leagues?
Well, the sweeper and the splitter that he added are really good, and Stuff Plus loves them, and they're getting good results, and they're why he's succeeding. The 4-seam that was one of the worst 4-seams in baseball is still one of the worst 4-seams in baseball. He's got a 56 Stuff Plus on that, so he's in that class. You heard Ottavino talk about this: the cutter, sweeper, changeup, sinker guyer. That's who he is. He is Michael King. He is Clark Schmidt. He is Hayden Wesnenski.
A wide range of names, though, as far as what you get for results.
His changeup is better than anybody on that list.
Okay.
So the best of a class, perhaps, with Michael King's velo being down. I mean, maybe he could be. Maybe I should have had Fedde ranked higher and King ranked lower. But King's going to get more wins. I was hoping that King would add more velo. King's 4-seam is way better than Fedde's. So in that class, I'm still got it King, Fedde, Schmidt, Wesnenski. And I'm sure there's more people like that.
Yeah.
It's a burgeoning field. But I remain a little skeptical with that 4-seam that way, and not having a great fastball. Weather gets warmer, ball flies out of the cell.
It's a 2-year deal that he signed back in the winter, and there were supposedly a lot of teams interested because inexpensive pitching that can be completely stretched out. For a guy that threw 180 in the third innings last year in the KBO, like, you have zero worries about letting him just go. That alone made him interesting to teams. And then, of course, the performance was great. We talked about how the K-BB percentage from Fedde last year in Korea was the best we've ever seen in the KBO, as far back as Fangraphs has it tracked. So if you're in the White Sox position, you have to trade him. Like, it's got to be an early season deal. It's got to be something you do like a month ahead of the trade deadline. Like, there's plenty of teams in need. We got more pitching injuries popping up that we're going to get to a little bit later in the show. So that would be, like, I'd be on the phone. I'd be seeking out a deal if I were Chris Getz, trying to do something right away, even if I liked Fedde and believed in him, because he's not going to help you. By the time that contract is up, you're going to be in the like beginning of year 3 of a 5 to 6 year rebuild.
Yeah. I know that Britt has a piece coming out. I'm trying to see if it came out yet. I saw it on Slack. It had a hilarious title. Let's see if it's up yet. No, it's not up yet. Watch this space for a piece from Britt about the GM in Chicago. Yeah, so I think most of the times GMs want to land with a good season and give themselves times to change things under the hood. I think in this case, he did not stick that landing.
No,
And so I think I agree with you. Where would he go? Would it mostly be good news to leave? I think so.
Yes, team context only gets better. Park
Park
situations.
context.
Okay,
If the
like
Red Sox
Cincinnati.
trade for him or Cincinnati trade for him, that might
Yeah.
not be great.
Yeah, I'd be a little worried about him in a place like
Yankees.
that boost homers. Yankees
Yeah.
would be tough,
He
but
already gives up. He has so far 1.7 for the season, and that's due to the bad fastballs, I think.
right, that totally makes sense. Let's talk about Bailey Falter just for a minute because he would be on the list of current Pirates that might be somehow keeping Paul Skeens at AAA. 3.33 ERA, 0.89 WHIP, but the underlying numbers look almost identical to what we've seen before. Really, the biggest difference is that there's a little less contact in the zone and a few more swinging strikes. But as far as the strikeout rate, the walk rate, the home run rates, we're not seeing anything that's massively different to past versions of Bailey Falter. So is there anything I'm missing in the flyby with him?
He has good vert. And really it's almost like a cut ride fastball, very little horizontal movement. He has good vertical approach angle on the fastball. So he's kind of a one-trick pony in a way. It's that four seam fastball, and you've seen that he throws it a lot. And he throws it a lot more than most people do. Right now, I think he's throwing it. Let's see here. It's weird because Stuff Plus doesn't like the pitch, and it hates Bailey Falter in general. But there is something interesting about that pitch, and he's throwing it right now 55% of the time. That's a lot for a four seam these days. I have to think that that's not going to last. I mean, there's other metrics you can use. I mean, Stuff Plus says it's not good, but also like a 17 minus 7 K minus BB. K minus BB, the average is 12. So if you got a 17 minus 7, that's not good. You could just look at 17 is not a good. League average strikeout rate is 21. If you have a 17, then maybe he has a good ground ball rate. Well, 37% ground ball rate. So he's not a grounder guy. He's going to give up some homers. He's not going to be good on the road. And there's a guy named Paul Skeens that is up to, what was it, 4 1/3?
4 1/3, just inching
4
along.
1/3. Yeah, I mean, 4 1/3 actually to me is good enough.
That's green light time. I updated it for the weekly recap that's going up today. I think May 7th, Tuesday night, home against the Angels is a Queen.
That was the one we
Priester
had.
Start. Yeah, it was going to be the Rockies series. Now I think it's going to be the Angels series. So we're closing in slowly on the arrival of Paul Skeens. How about Ranger Suárez? I think Ranger Suárez is rostered in a much wider range of leagues. His K rate's up early on, 27.1%. It's supported by an increase in swinging strike rate. He's cut his walk rate in half in the early going as well. We're talking about 33 innings, so decent amount of sample there. And he's got the ground ball rate back up in the range where it was when he crushed in 2021. Ranger Suárez had become my favorite pitcher to be wrong about because I'm always wrong about Ranger Suárez. When I start to believe, he gets hit. When I'm skeptical, he's amazing. So why am I always wrong about Ranger Suárez? Maybe you can unpack that one. And is there anything different with Suárez that would make skeptics right to believe this time?
His sinker is much better than this four seam. He has that 69 Stuff Plus on the four seam. That's not nice. And the cutter is a 103 Stuff Plus. So theoretically, he has a fastball for each side, I guess. But I would say that he is more comfortable against. What do you think he's more comfortable against? I would guess righties.
You think he's more comfortable against righties? It's pretty rare for a lefty to want to face righties.
Well, right now, his split is pretty amazing. 206 WOBA against righties, 395 against lefties. The cutter is his best fastball.
Yeah, but for his career, lefties, 227 WOBA, righties, 321. He's still more comfortable against lefties.
No. Oh, I'm on Bailey Falter.
So Bailey Falter has reverse splits on top of all the other weirdness.
And Ranger Suárez this year has a reverse split, but it's 194 against 213. So
no.
But yeah, for career, Yeah, 321. I would assume that he's like kind of a kitchen sink guy, right? Ranger Suárez. And when, one of his secondaries is just really popping, it's working. But when it's not, you can't get by. Like his best pitch is his cutter, and it has a 1-3 step loss. It's like it's not good enough to be like, oh well, I've always got this. All right. So some days when he comes in, he's like, oh, today I've got my cutter and my changeup and my curve. Like now you guys are in trouble, And then other days he's like, oh well, I only have my cutter.
I think he's one of those guys that kind of fits as like a top 40 to 50 starting pitcher. And when they're good, they deliver like top 25 starter ratios. And you can't quite figure out when or why. But then they're a little more park dependent than a lot of other players. That park is pretty difficult. And when they're bad, they're hard to use for more than the occasional start. So I think it's just the heater, even though it's a really impressive heater.
It's also he's a ground ball guy. I mean, and ground ball guys, he's not going to give you the strikeouts. Career 22, right now 27, but career 22% strikeout rate. And then what you will find with ground ball guys is higher whips. And 127 for his career. Right now, he's got a beautiful whip. But if you just look, even the last 2 years where he's been pretty good, 3.65 ERA in 2022 for him, 133 for Ranger Suárez whip in 2022, 142 whip for him last year. So I would assume the whip going forward starts with a 1.3.
That's a safe assumption. It's fine, but it's not necessarily good. John from the Live Hive, Ronaldo Lopez or Ranger Suárez rest of the season. Would you rather?
Would you rather? I mean, the whip, I think, is going to go to Ronaldo Lopez. The strikeout rate is definitely going to Ronaldo Lopez. The home run rate and the ground ball rate go to Suárez. I'm taking Lopez.
I don't know if I followed that step by step as like how you got to that.
Well, I like strikeouts. Like, think about what is actually a roto category.
Yeah,
I just listed a bunch of stuff.
You
trust
the K's from Lopez more.
Yeah, and also all the stuff that I listed from Suárez are not roto categories in most leagues, and all the stuff that I listed for Lopez are roto categories for most leagues. So,
All right, got one more here. Graham Ashcraft. Is this Casey Mize in reverse, where we're getting a lot of strikeouts now that we weren't getting before, and we're not getting the results yet? Will the ratios follow for Ashcraft? The one thing I really like about him, he's getting deep into his starts, modern deep, that is, not historically deep. But when I see a game log and every start in it starts with a 5 or something higher, I'm like, yeah, this is good. This is a guy that's giving me shots at wins, and that's something Ashcraft has done. 3 wins in 4 starts so far. Love that the K rate is up. Is this a guy that has always popped in the model, finally turning the corner?
2.89 ERA first time through the order. 4.15 ERA second time through the order. 12.46.
Hey, what's the league average third time through the order? Like 650? No, it's not 12. But it's over the 5 or a 6.
This is the whole thing with Graham Ashcraft that kills me is how many times have I thought, ooh, this would be maybe a good time for a Graham Ashcraft tweet because he's through 3 innings or 4 innings scoreless with like 5 strikeouts and no walks and like, yeah, this is it, baby. And then then the 5th inning comes, you're like, oh God damn it. The way to get around that third time through the order thing is add more pitches. The thing that he has done this year is add a sinker. I like that. It is theoretically a good idea. It's still only 3 pitches. That's what's so hilarious about him is he added a pitch and it's still not enough. I think, and what's funny too is that every time he adds a pitch, he's going to bring his stuff plus down.
Well, yeah, that's
they're not
true,
as good as his main 2 pitches.
He had some buffer though. His stuff plus number was always way higher than the results, so you could kind of like, oh, okay, sure, we'll give a little up, and the arsenal's better, so the pieces work. I mean, cutter, slider, sinker. That's kind of more of that banana peel that you want. But you'd really like one more peel.
I'd like the curve.
Yeah, you want the curve.
But I will say 343 Sierra is the best of his career by far. and that's reacting to a really good ground ball rate, really good strikeout rate, good strikeout rate, and really good walk rate. I like the mix. This is something where, like, if he's available in your 20 team, or you pick him up. If he's available if you have him in your AL only, you hold for a little bit longer. Like, I don't think this is actionable for 12 teamers. And even at 15 teamers, maybe stream away from home. Is that what I'd try?
I don't like doing that because you give up
the home advantage
that you get, the calls that you get from being at home. Even
Yeah,
though
but
you're getting
on
a
the
better
road
venue.
this year, he has 11 2/3 innings with 3 earned runs, and at home this year, he has 10 2/3 with 10 earned runs.
Yeah,
and I'm not saying
back.
I'm not gonna say that's gonna continue. Like,
no, but when you pull back, look at his career. That's another area. It's like, okay, how long has this really been going on? Well, kind of his whole career. His home ERA in his career for Graham Ashcraft, 5.46. Road, 4.10.
Yeah, and that 4.10 is so super useful.
Yeah, 4.10s are nice these days.
Yeah, so stream away from home. That's the best I can do.
Gross. It's better than it was, but not the exciting breakout I was hoping.
I've been told repeatedly to stop trying to make Graham Ashcraft happen. So
yeah, that's probably good advice. Let's shift the focus over to hitters for a bit. We're going to have a hitter rankings update coming out next week, and we started talking backstage about what really moves the needle right now. I mean, yes, I can move Elly De La Cruz up quite a bit because I was a little lighter on Elly De La Cruz than I should have been. But look, the bigger questions are like, what metrics matter? What's close to being stable? What's close to giving us something that we can actually lean on to say, yes, there is improvement that we care about?
I mean, my favorite, we named the podcast after it, is barrel rate.
Mm-hmm.
I really like barrel rate because it captures not only are you hitting the ball hard, but are you getting it off the ground. And so you can look at something like Elly De La Cruz's line and be like, well, there's too many ground balls. It's not going to work. He's not going to hit for power. But he hits the ball so hard that when he does hit the ball in the air, it's a barrel, you know? And I think that is actually kind of a sustainable approach for him. And I think that the ground ball rate will slightly get better over time. But when you look at somebody like Michael Garcia, who was somebody that we liked going into the season, there's a lot of people kind of asking, you know, is this not going to happen? Were we wrong about this? Is it time to drop him in 10 and 12 teamers? And I would say no, because the barrel rate is up. 11% is a good barrel rate. And on top of that, his strikeout rate is down, and he's stolen 6 bases. So I see, you know, this 213 batting average on balls in play and see that's the outlier. I don't believe in that. And I think that he could even go past. You see somebody like Zip saying 253. Well, the Bat X says 269. And that's because he hits the ball hard and the Bat X uses more StatCast numbers. So a 269. And if the barrel rate holds, it's a 269 with 20 homers and 20 steals. So he'll end the year with 250 and 20 homers and 20 steals, and you will be happy that you had him. And there's a little bit, just a tiny bit of a chance with somebody with this kind of strikeout rate and that kind of batted ball power and that kind of speed that there is like a month where he hits 350 and he actually ends the season at like 275 or something, you know, because he does have that set of skills that could kind of go off. So, you know, it's kind of paradoxical, but despite his struggles, I think I might move Michael Garcia up in rankings depending on where I had him.
Yeah, and it's weird because I know in some shadow leagues, like 10-team leagues, after the great first week, there were some questions about maybe cutting him. And process is so important. That's what we're looking at, process stats. We're looking at things like year-to-year barrel rate changes. You look at hard hit rate too. You'll at least find guys that are hitting the ball harder, even if they're not lifting it consistently. You look at something like swing percentage, and sometimes you want to merge that with overall swing rates just to make sure that the
so what are we looking at?
Approach is all in sync. So across the board, left to right, if you're watching on YouTube, we've got the barrel rate risers starting on the left. We have hard hit rate risers. Tyler
Stevenson, Elly De La Cruz, Riley Green.
Yep. So we're going barrel rate for the first list on the left. We're looking at hard hit rate risers. These are from Fangraphs. You can look at the season stats.
Tyler Stevenson's a great buy low, I think.
Stevenson looks like an excellent buy low. You're looking at Riley Green being a massive riser in barrel rate. The breakout certainly looks like it could be happening. There's Michael Garcia right there, 7th on that list. So plenty of reason to be excited. And one thing I would say is, in addition to so it's barrel rate, hard hit rate, it's O swing percentage. We're looking for guys who are swinging less at pitches outside the zone. And
this is Josh Naylor's in the middle of a breakout. And I just traded him away in one keeper league. I feel so stupid.
Yeah. And then I've got, I think it's zone swing percentage is the last one I'm looking at. Who's swinging more at pitches inside the zone? Who's attacking more? So if you can find guys on multiple lists like this, multiple leaderboards, those are probably your most interesting players to either trade for, to try and pick up in shallow leagues where available. I see Ahmed Rosario popping up on a few of these lists. I don't know what the playing time situation looks like given how crowded things are in Tampa Bay, but the problem for Ahmed Rosario was never like a lack of raw talent. I always felt like it kind of came back to not enough patience at the plate and being a low OBP sort of guy whose overall offensive skills usually pushed him more to the bottom third of a lineup, right? So for fantasy purposes, it didn't give us enough to fall back on with counting stats. He wasn't going to be a good run producer, but he also wasn't going to score a lot of runs because he was running low OBPs and getting buried in the 7 spot.
Yeah, I think they wanted him to be basically a Manny Margot replacement.
Mm-hmm.
You got a right-hander, and they're playing him mostly they've played him at second and short, amazingly, but mostly in the outfield and right field. So this is really, I think, a Manny Margot package. But he did a lot of work this offseason in increasing his bat speed. What you're seeing is not necessarily the max EV yet, but not seeing the max EV is not as bad as, as other stats. It's like one of those weird things where like he could hit a 111 tomorrow. It's still not really a good enough sample, but the 8% barrel rate is now in a decent sample to say, wow, look at this 12% strikeout rate. And that's 8% barrel rate. That's the best combo of those two things in his career. So you could maybe say, all right, well, he's a career 274 hitter that averaged something like, 7 homers a year or 8 homers a year. Maybe this is the year he hits 280 with, 12 to 15 homers. He's definitely had that kind of year in him before. That's not like every league guy, but one guy that really sticks out to me that's on a lot of those lists was Brian De La Cruz. And he's on mostly good lists in that he's chasing a little bit less, but he's mostly hitting more barrels. And he's kind of getting 2 barrels that you kind of expected him to, given his max EV. And he's showing the power you might want to have expected out of Brian De La Cruz. He's also missing a lot more, and has a 30% strikeout rate right now, and has like the worst park situation out of all of the names that we looked at. I tend to think that, given Miami's struggles, the fact that he's not a free agent until 2028, that maybe they're just going to play him every day. Maybe they're in the point right now of just being like, who's going to be here next year, rather than who's going to help us win this year.
Yeah, and I would have trusted them with Kimming at the helm to make the same sort of call. I trust them to at least play the guys that are better future fits. Like, I think they're an organization that's smart enough to do that, even if they didn't bring in enough interesting, talented players that I like for the roster to begin the season. So I definitely see the case for De La Cruz. I think he's the kind of guy that could get dropped in a medium-sized league and end up being a nice pickup just because the playing time is so steady. Just going back to Rosario for a second, I think he's one of those guys that I'd like to see, what does happen with another season in this run environment and this stolen base environment if the playing time holds. Like last year, he became a part-time player with the Dodgers, 545 plate appearances for the season, 15 for 17 as a base stealer.
Mm-hmm.
Ahmed Rosario's been an efficient base stealer now going back to about 2021, pretty much ever since he got to Cleveland. So there might be one more notch in terms of stolen base contributions if the playing time holds. My reason for not being
Tampa
sure
runs
about the
too.
playing time, they do run. My only concern about the playing time is not what's been happening. He's been playing like an everyday guy recently.
Josh
Lowe comes back. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
because Josh Lowe is a lefty, Ahmed Rosario is a righty. That could chew up some of his playing time. But if they're willing to play him in the outfield and a little bit on the dirt, maybe, just maybe, there's a way for him to continue playing close to an everyday clip.
Also, a righty that he could swim move past, Harold Ramirez, is 29 years old and has passed through waivers before and has a 63 WRC plus right now, a 1% walk rate. You think that Ahmed Rosario's 2.5% walk rate is low? Check out Harold Ramirez.
And at least with Rosario, like this is kind of always part of who he's been. If he keeps that K rate down under 15%, that can work. It's sort of that peak Tim Anderson skill set. Low K rate, low walk rate, but hits everything, hits it all over, gets to some power and steals bases. Okay, yeah, we'll take that, especially if he ends up in prominent places in the lineup. I just feel like we throw so much dirt on Harold Ramirez. Poor guy. Deserves better, because every time we look at that roster, we're like, get Harold Ramirez out of there. Just get him out of there. It's not personal. We just think there are more interesting players stuck behind him.
He was their 3-hitter a week ago.
Yeah.
Maybe he's not going anywhere. If he's not going anywhere, then Ahmed Rosario retreats to sort of backup duty, because he is not good defensively. He's not going to play center field for them.
You know what? The Rays taught me this a while back. I used to think that batting order placement was a sign of intent and job security. And the guy that they helped teach me this lesson with was Nathaniel Lowe, back when Nathaniel Lowe was a shiny new toy that we thought was going to be a star. They were hitting him right in the heart of the order.
And then they traded him.
And it was when someone was hurt. Well, it was when someone was hurt. And I thought, okay, he's up. They believe like he's their guy. They're putting him right in the thick of the order. He's hitting third or fourth for him pretty soon after he debuted. Whoever it was that they had, whatever veteran they had coming back, like G-Man Choi or whoever it was at the time, comes back. There goes Nate Lowe back to AAA. Like, whoa, he went from middle of the order to AAA just like that. I don't even think he was struggling at the plate either. It was just sort of the way the roster was built and not wanting to lose somebody else and bumping him down. So as much as I want that to be a thing, I don't think it's always a sign that you're completely safe on the roster. I think my other example is late career Hanley Ramirez in Cleveland. Yes, Cleveland Hanley Ramirez. There's a jersey that almost no one has. He was in the heart of their order for the month or so.
He got DFA.
He was there, got DFA'd. Yeah.
I guess the idea is like we believe in this player until the process stats have stabilized. So, like, what I would say is, there are some numbers on Harold Ramirez's line that are bad for Harold Ramirez. 65.8% ground ball rate for his for this year, 55 for his career. 108 max EV this year. Before this year, he'd been at 113 or better. And then the O swing, which has always been bad, 51% for Ramirez. These are all process stats that basically stabilize in the next couple of weeks, supposedly, where there's more signal. Stabilizing meaning there's more signal than noise. Doesn't mean that it's all signal. Doesn't mean he couldn't improve, actually. It just means it's more signal than noise. And they may decide at that point, it's more signal than noise. Like, we got Ahmed Rosario. His signals are better. And we, some point, need to make room for Junior Caminero.
Right. And that doesn't seem that far off. It's going to come down to that K rate coming down a little bit more for Caminero at AAA, but they need that impact bat. They need that upgrade. It's going to happen. I think it's more like weeks than months at this point before they make that shift. And you're right about all those things. Even the things Ramirez hasn't been great at in the past, they've gotten worse to the point where you have to be asking those questions internally if you're making those decisions in the Rays front office. So hitter ranking changes this time of year. We're looking for barrel rate shifts. We're looking for hard hit rate shifts. We're looking for drops in K rate. We're looking at changes in what you're swinging at, not chasing as many pitches outside the zone, swinging more in the zone. We're always looking at playing time. If the roles have fluctuated in a way where you got more playing time, that's something that can move you up in value as well.
I'm buying Varsho in any league. I'm buying Cronenworth and Conforto in sort of 15s. I'm buying Riley Green in any league.
Oh, I mean, it's buy high on Riley Green, but yeah, I was trying to trade for him in keeper and dynasty leagues last year, and people saw the same thing I did. It wasn't working, wasn't tricking anybody, wasn't fooling anyone at all to get Riley Green. What are you doing with Joe Adell? I mean, look at Joe Adell. Barrel rate's up, hard hit rate up. Swinging a little more outside the zone, fine. That's within career norms. K rate way down. Tiny sample. 43 plate appearances so far. He's popped a couple of homers. He's stolen 5 bases, been caught 4 times, which isn't great. But look, he's doing everything he can to fill up the stat sheet and hold on to a spot. And is this the Joe Adell we've been waiting for?
I mean, the swing strike rate being the lowest of his career is kind of fun because that's the thing that's probably in the biggest sample out of anything he's got, you know? And I also love for him this number, 10 and 15. That's the Angels record. The worse that number gets, the more playing time he gets. Is how I see it. Right now, I guess, he's probably, maybe some of those numbers are inflated by how they're using him. But he's seen more righties than lefties. He's got 33 plate appearances against righties and 10 against lefties. So it's not just that. I'm trying to figure out how they're using him.
Well, Aaron Hicks looks like he might be done again, kind of like he did at the beginning of last year, right? Before that resurgence as a part-time guy in Baltimore. So
and now he's 34. So, we know from Jeff Zimmerman's work that projected bounce backs are less believable at this age.
Right. So if you look at that outfield and say, what can we do to look both short-term and long-term? I mean, you bump Aaron Hicks out because you have more interesting short-term guys. And the answer to the second question does come back to Joe Adell. Like, you got to figure it out. You got to decide if he's part of your organization or not. I'd rather give that playing time to Adell than Hicks. You're probably going to be bad either way, so it doesn't make that much of a difference. And you're playing, Ward, Trout, Adell, and Moniak as your 3 outfielders in your primary DH in that scenario. That's fine. That'll work.
Yeah, and you can keep Hicks around more as you just sort of retreat him in the background a little bit. And then at some point, there's somebody's got to pop up in your minor leagues where, the record is now, 30 and 60 or whatever. And you just release Hicks and you start phasing out Moniak because he's not playing well, So I think that at some point you need to start making a meritocracy. And Adell right now is making the best case for playing time. And I think that, going forward, he's most likely to hit 230, but it's with power and speed. And if he does keep this K rate, then there's a chance for 250 or 260 because he's going to hit the crap out of the ball.
Yep.
And so that's worth picking up in deeper leagues. And I don't know if it's worth a trade because the other person's now finally getting excited about him too.
Right. The person with Joe Adell is going to have the same reasons to like him.
Going to have the same Fangraphs page open.
Yeah. So unless they've been a long-term skeptic who's just been stuck with him in a dynasty league and they're like, hey, I finally can get something for Joe Adell. I don't think that's the case. They probably believe that's why they held on to him so long. I don't think you're able to really make moves for him outside of those pickups. But I think, 15-team leagues, 5 outfielders. I think Joe Adell gets a spot because it looks like things are shifting enough PT-wise in Anaheim. We need to go. A few thank yous on our way out the door. Thanks again to Adam Ottavino for joining us at the top of today's show. Thanks to Brian Smith for producing this episode behind the scenes. You can find us on Twitter at Eno Saris, at Derek and Riper, at Rates and Barrels, and be sure to jump into the Discord if you haven't done so already. We'll put the link for that in the show description as we do for each and every episode. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you on Monday.
Thanks for listening.